What's up, everybody? It's Tuesday, so it's time for Tactical Tuesday once again. How's it going? I think my audio's a little loud here. Let me fix that real quick. All right, that should be better. All right, well, we got some cool stuff to talk about today. We're talking about Tyrannofexes today, chat, because I played a Tyrannofex in its very first tournament, and oh boy, is this guy, he's a real trooper, that Tyrannofex. I like that guy. So, played a tournament this weekend. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Maybe talk a little bit about some interesting includes that we can take in Crusher Stampede lists, and we'll just go from there. I think we also have maybe a little bit of meta talk to cover as well, because we had some really interesting events over the weekend with some competitive events. We might touch on that too. But let's frickin' get into it. How's it going, everybody in chat? Thanks, everyone, for saying hi. Hope everyone's having a good one. Had a good weekend. Got some games in. And let's get into it. So, I played Crusher Stampede this weekend at my local RTT. And interestingly, so this was, for those who I'll give them a little shout out for those in the area, maybe. This is Webway Games in Massachusetts, and they're just announced at this event that they're actually going to be starting to do several GTs a year. So hopefully we'll get some GT games in at the local store. They're also going to be rolling all their tournaments into an invitational tournament. They're going to do a whole tournament series. It sounds awesome. I'm actually super hyped for these guys. It's a brand new store, started a couple months ago, and I'm just like, I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud. But we went there to play this Tyrannofex yesterday or over the weekend, chat, and I was super psyched. So I put a copy of my list in the bot ! List in there if you want to take a look at it. But I'll cover my list real quickly, and I'm gonna be honest, chat. I think this is my favorite version of Crusher Stampede so far. I feel like I've nailed it. I don't know. We might make a couple changes, but I really, after my games this weekend and after my games with the list so far, I really don't have any changes that I would make. I mean, obviously, new meta discoveries coming out would change things up, but I'm pretty hype about this particular version of the list. So, it's a single battalion detachment, High Fleet Leviathan, Crusher Stampede, all the normal stuff. It has only one Hive Tyrant, which is, like, pretty sad. He's the Smashy Hive Tyrant, Biomorphic Carapace, 2 sets of Scything Talons, Rampaging Beast for the additional D3 attacks. I did have an extra slot in my Alpha Leader Beast Warlord trait, so I took Swarm Leader, because I didn't have a second Hive Tyrant, so I didn't have something else to put Murderous Size on, and I wasn't really feeling the other Adeptive Physiologies. There is an argument to be made for taking enhanced resistance on the Hive Guard unit that's in here. It feels a little bit superfluous because they already have an invulnerable save, so big AP isn't going to hit them too hard, but especially if you're on like US open terrain and they have big bricks of terrain with line of sight blockers on them, so you can be in cover with enhanced resistance, especially against AP2 artillery like other Hive Guard. That makes you super difficult to kill. You're on a 3+ or a 4+ save depending on whether or not you get cover, and especially against Tau, that's a super big deal because almost all of their indirect fire is AP2. So you would ignore all the AP on that. Now, obviously, you're already ignoring 1 point of AP just because of your vulnerable save. So it is a question, and it's also a question of whether or not you're going to play against Tau. So far, I have not found a lot of Tau to play against, which is interesting because, like I mentioned at the top, we had some interesting results from over the weekend, and Tau are just murdering everyone. But at least locally to me, Tau are just being knocked out by Adeptus Custodes players. I think that has something to do with the terrain that's being used, and that's probably something we'll talk about at the end. So I'm not as worried about Tau as I am about Adeptus Custodes, but we did take we've made some concessions here to the Adeptus Custodes matchup. One of them is that we've dropped the second Hive Tyrant out of the list that I played the previous weekend. I played against 2 Adeptus Custodes players at my last tournament, and the second Hive Tyrant, and to be honest, even the first Hive Tyrant, is kind of garbo. At least the first Hive Tyrant can run around and be doing interrogations, be smiting people, be scoring objectives. He's doing stuff like that. But the second Hive Tyrant, they flip a unit to Shadow Keepers and immediately kill it. And it's like big poopy. So we dropped the second Hive Tyrant. We took a Neurothrope. Now this guy I actually really like. He gives you a good slot for Adaptive Neurolobe because He just sits in the back and generates CP passively over the course of the game. He's also, on turn 2 onwards, he's a really good candidate for Psychic Interrogation, because he really only has one support power that he's going to be casting. You're not losing like a huge amount of psychic potential by using him for the psychic action. You're only losing out a smite, essentially. It's assuming you don't need Onslaught. If you do need Onslaught, you either have to Synaptic Channel it over to somebody, or you have to just do the Psychic Interrogation with the regular Hive Tyrant, which is fine. But the regular Hive Tyrant, he just has offensive powers, so he's Paroxysm Psychic Scream. So you're losing out 2 smites, essentially, if you end up doing the action with the Hive Tyrant. You lose out on 1 smite and or maybe Onslaught if you do it with the Neurothrope, and it's not as quite a big of a deal as it is losing it on Hive Tyrant. So I was worried, because when I switched out the second Hive Tyrant from the list, I would feel the pain of losing the extra cast or the extra support power, and I really haven't, which has been interesting. I did move all of the Mass Convergence powers moved over to Swarmlord, so he has Aggressive Surge, Synaptic Barrier, and he's also in the list because he's super duper good. We have 3 units of Tyranid Warriors in the troop slot, 2 Bioweapon Bonds, 1 with just 4 dudes in it because I had 17 extra points, and that last dude makes the unit a little bit more resilient, which I appreciate. Elites is where things get a little interesting. We have a unit of Venom Thropes in there. That was a bit of a concession to the Tau matchup, because they do... the minus with the hit is brutal for Tau, and they basically have to waste a turn shooting Venom Thropes before they can shoot Hive Guard. So it's kind of like a Blade of Wounds for the Hive Guard, because their efficiency against the Hive Guard goes down so fast if they don't shoot the Venom Thropes. They also have to target select really oddly in order to kill one of them before they start shooting at the Hierodules. So... the Venom Thropes, if they're at max unit, if they're at 3 models, they'll protect the Hierodules, or they'll give them -1 to be hit, which means that a unit like a Broadside, which has your indirect fire and your railguns, really wants to kill the Venom Thropes before it shoots the railguns. Now, it can shoot the indirect fire 24 shots, depending on how ATS works and if you have rerolls and all that stuff like that. It's a question whether or not it kills 1 Venom Thrope, because they're wounding on 5s in the Maliceptor aura, and they're into an invulnerable save, and they're -1 to hit, so they're probably hitting on 5s. It gets really awkward. They hit 6 times, they wound 2, and you probably make a save. If their ATS goes ham, sometimes they can kill it, but oftentimes that doesn't happen, so that means their first set of railguns are going to be shooting at -1 to hit. That's a big deal. Plus, then, even if they've killed a Venom Thrope, they've only killed 1, which means the Hive Guard are protected against the rest of the shooting, from the rest of the indirect fire anyway. You could stack that by putting the Adaptive Physiology, the Enhanced Resistance, on the Hive Guard. I don't know if you need it, but I think the Venom Thropes are great. I also just love Venom Thropes. They're action monkeys. They lose their auras while they're performing actions, but if you do actions like Raise the Banners High that only matter in your opponent's turn, or that complete in your turn, their auras don't matter for your turn. They only matter for your opponent's turn. So they'll start raising a banner, lose their -1 to hit aura, complete raising a banner at the end of your turn, gain the -1 to hit aura back, and then when your opponent shoots you, you don't care. They also just have a bunch of attacks. I don't know. I think they're great. They're also, interestingly, they're a good candidate for a lot of the buffs we have in the army if the Hive Guard get nuked, because you can put... I have the Maliceptor in here as well. He has Focal Essence. You can put Focal Essence on the Venom Thropes. It gives them access potentially to a 1 point of AP, which is their big weakness, is that they don't have any AP. But it also lets them reroll all of their damage rolls, which is good because they have a bunch of D3 damage weapons. And if you put Swarm Leader on them to reroll their hit rolls, they actually kind of go ham, because they have the equivalent of 12 attacks with, at that point, full rerolls, because they naturally reroll their wound rolls. And then if they're Focal Essence, they also reroll their damage rolls. So they're rerolling at every step of the attack sequence, which is pretty nutty. If your opponent has 2+ saves or something like that, they're not going to do too much damage. But occasionally you run into a matchup where your opponent has a lot of light infantry or something like that, and Venom Thropes just sink in and start tearing people up. Those guys are awesome. They can also, especially if your opponent has fast units, you can think something like Witches or Hormagaunts or something like that, that can get in and engage Hive Guard. Venom Thropes are another tool in your toolbox to extricate the Hive Guard before it's their activation to shoot. So you can use all of your psychic powers to smite that unit down low, try to kill them with the Venom Thropes, and if you can kill them with the Venom Thropes, then the Hive Guard unit can shoot as well. They're just super useful. I frickin' love Venom Thropes. They're super awesome. And then we got heavy support, 1 Barbed Tyrodule, 1 Side Tyrodule, 1 Tyrannofex. I was talking some smack about the Barbed Tyrodule last week, chat. I was like, well, Side Tyrodule's better. Barbed Tyrodule's not so good. It's less efficient. It's 40 points more. It's slower. It has less melee attacks. I don't like it. And then I realized that every time I played against Adeptus Custodes, having basically several shooting activations made the Adeptus Custodes defensive stratagem use super tough, because you can split the Hive Guard into 2 separate attacks and do that twice, so you can target potentially 4 separate units with the Hive Guard. You can also potentially split the Hierodul's attacks into 2 units, or you just wait till they have used it against the Hive Guard, or you hold the Hive Guard, so they have to use their defensive strats against the Hierodul. And it has a really good profile at shooting Adeptus Custodes, especially bikes. The Custodes that have a 1+ save or are in cover, that gets a little awkward because it's only AP2. But against bikes, they don't get that light cover benefit from terrain, so they're going to be saving on 4s. And this dude punks a bike or 2 every turn, and it makes their activation, their defensive stratagem use super duper weird. So I think I've turned all the way around, chat. I think the Barbed Hierodul is legit. I think it's fine. I think 2 double scythe is defensible, but I think having the flexibility of 1 barb to 1 scythe, that's where it's at. And part of the reason is because you aren't just relying on the scythe Hieroduls to hold the middle of the table, because we have our little baby boy in here. I have him behind me. Here he is. Look at this beautiful guy. This little Tyrannofex. He's going to hold the center of the table, and your opponent doesn't want to attack him because he's 160 points. He's almost as difficult to kill as a Hierodul, and he's not, like, charging anyone. He doesn't do any damage in melee, but if they don't kill him, he sprays half their army to death and then holds the objective for another turn. It's a real catch-22 of what your target selection is. So he mucks up your opponent's target selection, he shoots his gun a bunch of times, and he's just an abysmal idiot to shoot at. So I love that little dude, too. So let's talk about the terrain. Whew. There's a question here, Jonathan. Can the Malanthrope fill the same role as the Venomthrope? Not really. So I don't like Malanthropes for a couple reasons. The big one is that it takes an HQ slot. And as you can see, especially Crusher Stampede uses all 3 HQ slots for important people, basically every time. It's also more expensive, and it does less damage. Obviously, it has the big benefit of not being targetable, so it won't die, which is great. And it's a monster, so it can unlock another infantry choice, and it can, use breaking through and all that stuff. Like, there are benefits to a Malanthrope, but being more expensive and taking an HQ slot, in my opinion, kill it. And then every time I play it, I definitely miss the fact that Venomthropes can spike in combat. Your opponent, if they're not focusing hard on the Venomthropes, which a lot of opponents won't because either they don't care about the -1 or they're just not worried about it. The Venomthropes they can just eat objectives, they can screen for you, they help protect the Hive Guard from physically and melee because it's 3 40 mil bases. A Malanthrope can't do that. So I don't really rate the Malanthrope. Yeah, I don't like it. I'm not a big fan. All right. Let's talk about some games, chat. So we rolled up. That was the list. I was feeling pretty good about it. I racked my brain about it for a long time, trying to find a way to get both the Tyrannofex and the Venomthropes into the list. And the only way I could do it was to cut the second Hive Tyrant. And like I said before, I did not miss that guy. So I didn't feel too bad about it. So we rocked up. In round 1, we played Data Scry Salvage, which I wasn't super psyched about because... this is the spiritual successor to Vital Intelligence in GT 2021, which was hands down the worst mission in the packet. Full stop. It was awful. Some factions could play it well. I think Tyranids are one of them, to be fair. But 90% of the time, if you rolled first and you were good mobility, you weren't super slow and dumb, you could take every objective, lock them in, and your opponent just died. The version that they have now is better, but it's not fixed. And unfortunately, the scores, I think, are going to continue to represent that. We're going to continue to see big blowouts on this mission probably until it goes to a hold 1, hold 2 mission instead of a hold 2, hold 3. I think that's a big deal. I also am not sure I like the locking mechanic on this one. It's a lot toned down from what it was. You can now only lock the objectives in the center of the table, so the 4 along the midline of the two deployment zones. And let me get my telestrator up here, which I didn't start earlier, so I'm super good at that. So the deployment zones are diagonal in this mission like this. You can lock these objectives. but only with objective secured units. So it helps Custodes quite a bit because their infantry get there at objective secure. I mean, it also helps Tyranids because you can pay a CP to make something objective secured to lock an objective. I believe you have to pay beforehand because I think... No, that's not true. You lock at the end of the... You lock when you score, so you lock at the end of the command phase. So you just pay the CP to Hive Mind Imperative, and then you get the objective with your stuff, which is... I mean, it's fine. But I also think it is too first turn dependent. My opponent's list this round was actually super interesting. It looks like I didn't take a picture early on in the game. Unfortunately, this is turn 2, I think. Let's see if I... Yeah, they don't have a lot of stuff. But it was Imperial Guard, and it was Death Korps of Krieg. And this game kind of opened my eyes to Death Korps of Krieg a little bit. Now, I think... I'll come out and say it. This game wasn't the greatest game of 40k I ever played, for sure. But I do think Death Korps of Krieg, potentially as a substrate to a soup army, to an Imperium soup army, probably has legs. And that's because of some of the special units that they have. And specifically as a tool in the metagame. So what my opponent had, he had sort of standard stuff. He had a big conscript blob with a relic bolt pistol that lets you shoot conscripts to make them auto pass morale, so he doesn't have to. They don't run away to combat attrition as they lose models. He had a couple units of infantry, 2 full payload manticores, 2 tank commanders, and a full brace of Death Korps combat engineers. And let me see if I can pull up these guys' data sheet here real quick, because it's pretty wild. And this is not a unit. I think I'd look at them when the Death Korps supplement had come out, but it caught me off guard, to say the least, how effective these guys were. Let me find it. Yeah, here we go. So, this Combat Engineer Squad, let's see if I can zoom out a little bit here so we can see it. Yeah. For 8 points a model, you get basically a veteran Imperial Guardsman, right? So 3+ ballistic skill, but he has Carapace armor, so he's a 4+ armor save, which is good. He has this phenomenal ranged attack, just the base ranged attack. I mean, it's not phenomenal, but compared to regular Imperial Guard infantry, and for 8 points a model, it is very good. So it's Assault 3, 12-inch range, which is great because, I mean, you're going to be fighting on objectives. You're going to be bailing these guys out of transports, and that's fine. But here's the kicker here, chat. This gas bomb grenade. So it's a grenade attack. Fortunately, you can use Grenadiers for 1 CP to allow all 10 models in the unit to throw the gas bombs. And it's a D6 blast 2+ poison, which means against 90% of the metagame right now, it wounds everything on 2s, and it's AP2. AP2. Now, a lot of times you think about poison attacks, and you're like, oh, it's like a splinter weapon or whatever. It'll be fine. But this is an AP2 splinter weapon, essentially, that wounds on 2s. Absolutely wild for 8 points a model. And 1 CP to activate the stratagem. So essentially, you put these guys in chimeras, you run the chimeras up to the middle of the table. If your opponent doesn't kill them, like you can do dedicated transport stuff. You can emergency disembark into cover and in awkward places for your opponent to kill them. Then your turn, you move those guys back up to the objective. Grenadiers put 7 or 8 D6 2+ poison attacks into them at AP2. This immediately flips out a transhuman out of a Adeptus Custodes squad. It potentially cracks a transhuman on a Crusher Stampede monster. My opponent killed both of Hive Tyrants, both Swarmlord and my Hive Tyrant this game with the gas bombs. It ignores my penalties to wound. So stuff like Biomorphic Carapace is not affected by it because this one might be because typical poison is unmodified. This one is just a wound roll. So I think -1 might affect it. That's weird. I don't know about that. But yeah, it's absolutely brutal. This unit's incredible. It's so good. I don't know about the rest of the Astra Militarum army. I mean, infantry squads are just double moving up the table are fine at contesting objectives. You get into an issue if your opponent gets into you and starts engaging stuff because Imperial Guard have nothing to deal with that. But that's where potential soup comes in. You could soup in something like Adeptus Custodes, something that's a little bit more meaty and can kick back harder and a little bit more resilient. And I think this just gives you another tool in the toolbox. So that's what I played against. The list was very cool. I did end up going first, and that was a big deal. So I basically pushed everything super duper far up the table. We pushed all of the monsters into a little cluster right here on turn 1. My opponent has 2 tank commanders behind the building here, this building right here, and unfortunately for him, I think I was able, because they were Demolisher Cannon tank commanders, I was able to basically stay out of his range on turn 1. So his shooting into me didn't really do too much. He tried to fire into warriors that were threatening. I had my big warrior unit threatening a lock-in on this objective. I transhumaned them and bounced all the Manticore attacks, which was pretty lucky. I think I lost 1 or 2. And then from there, was able to sort of like take this commanding position. We can see my opponent's hand's in front of it, unfortunately, but the Hive Tyrant went in. He got souped up with all of the buffs. Got hit with I think a big aggressive surge for 2 or 3 additional attacks. He rolled a 3 on his additional attacks from Rampaging Beast. He hit both tank commanders and killed both of them in one fight phase, which was pretty lucky. He ended up getting killed by those combat engineers. The Chimeras all had combat engineers in them, so there's one over here that killed them. And the Swarm Lord moved up the next turn, and another unit of combat engineers that was hiding back here killed him too. Which was it was very sad, but it was I think very appropriate for my opponent, especially this combat engineers just sitting back in there and threatening me. It was very good. And sort of hilariously, towards the end of the game, this Hyrule, I think, had eaten a big hit from one of the Manticores and failed a bunch of saves and took a bunch of damage. And he was down to just a couple wounds. And on the last turn of the game, my opponent had an Inquisitor who dominated the Tyrannofex and actually shot the Hyrule and killed it. So unfortunately, Tyrannofex killing my own models there, but just proves how powerful Tyrannofex is. He's so strong he can kill Hyrules with his gun. But unfortunately, I was basically able to grab these 3 objectives for the majority of the game and keep this one clear, and just was able to force out primary objective scoring for the majority. I think my opponent played probably a little bit too safe. Certainly with the Astra Militarum's ability to fling infantry squads onto objectives to disrupt scoring and potentially force me to use multiple uses or to hide my imperative like over and over and over again to maintain control of my objectives, can certainly make things more difficult on me. And instead he played a little bit too safe, I think. As you can see, he has like 2 infantry squads hiding in the back here, which is like a little unnecessary. He had 1 more that was like hiding behind this building, so it was like way in the corner here, wasn't even scoring an objective. And I think the score would have looked a lot closer had those units been pushed up to score a little bit more aggressively. And that ended up being... I lost a couple points because he did have an Astropath and an Inquisitor. I went for a Psychic Interrogation, and he ended up denying it a couple times. So I lost some points on Psychic Interrogation. I lost a couple points on Bring It Down. I think 1 Chimera survived on like 2 points. And I think I took no prisoners, but he only gave up like 12 on no prisoners, I think. So I was never going to max the points, but I was just looking for the easiest scores I could get. And that ended up 86 to 45. But again, I think it would have been a lot closer if my opponent had been pushing a little bit more aggressively to get those 3 objective scores. We had situations like in this one, I think this like the conscript unit could have moved up to touch this objective and forced me to kill it to stop him from scoring, and he just didn't. So I was like, okay, I guess I don't have to go there this turn. So it could have, I think it could have been closer for sure, but I was definitely going to be advantaged from the get-go. Both playing Crusher Stampede, let's be fair, but also just being able to go first and push so aggressively up the table. Was definitely felt good that I had the 2 flamers between the Sai Tyrannid and the Tyrannofex in my list. The Tyrannofex basically, I think he'd run up to stay out of range of the Demolisher Cannon turn 1, and then moved up to this position and just stood there for the rest of the game and it was flamering infantry squads and conscripts all game. And it felt good because my opponent had such a volume of models that I had that big flamer in the bank. So that was pretty solid. And this is what the game ended up looking like. The Swarm Lord went in. I think he went in to try to get that Chimera and ended up failing. is what happened, which was unfortunate. This guy survived on like 1 wound, but he got killed by a last pistol or something really awkward on the subsequent turn. And then both the High Tyrants died. So my opponent's got some good points. I think he had Bring It Down as well, so he was getting some good points on that. He also took the, I think for the Emperor, is that right? The Astra Militarum secondary, which was, it did okay, I guess. He didn't kill too much of a volume of units, so he didn't end up scoring too highly. So we were out of round 1 there, feeling pretty good. My opponent also had the Hades Breaching Drill, this little thing, which is a pretty good unit. A good delivery system, I think, for maybe Melta teams or something like that, like special weapon squads. But it's kind of monstrous in melee, and it's 6 damage if it attacks a vehicle. So it's a little silly. It also has a 4+ invulnerable save in melee, so if you get into melee, the Maleceptor went over, and I was like, I'll charge it. I think I tapped it with one of the Hyrule guns and did a bunch of damage, and I was like, I'll engage it with the Hyrule, or with the Maleceptor, and if he gets an attack through, he'll probably kill it. And then he made all the invulnerable saves against Maleceptor's attack, and like plowed it for 6 or something. I was like, Jesus, calm down, all right? I didn't want to be, I didn't mean it, I swear. Please, sir. But that put me into round 2, so let's go. Round 2. So round 2, we were on Scouring. Everyone's least favorite mission from GT 2021. I think it's much better in GT 2022. Again, it's not entirely fixed. It's still pretty heavily favors the player going first, just because it's so easy to stranglehold this mission, and you can just get it turn 1 for free going first, and your opponent has to kind of run into your threat ranges going second. But it's not nearly as one-sided as it used to be. Back in 2021, if you went first and you were able to either threaten the middle, or like set up to threaten the middle, or just dominate the middle with your stuff, you know, Death Guard and stuff like that did that a lot. They would put these enormous blobs of super tough to kill stuff in the middle of the table and just say go, and you have very little chance to get through. But I actually quite like this mission in GT 2022. I think it's interesting, and it's much more playable than it was. It's also hold 1 to score 4, hold 2 to score 8, rather than 2 to 3 in the previous version, which means that you score a lot more consistently. In 2021, the games would just be an absolute runaway if one player was able to get primary objective control, and sometimes random stuff would happen and be like a 10-point swing or a 13-point swing, because you would go from scoring hold 2 for 5 to hold 3, which automatically got you hold more, so you would immediately jump 10 points and then maybe stranglehold or something like that. And we saw some really close games get ended by like one person biffing a bunch of invulnerable saves, losing control of an objective, and just immediately the game's over. And that was no good. So I much prefer it in 2022. So this time I was up against the menace, Adeptus Custodes, and at this point, it is a little telling, I think, in the metagame. Well, I think something like 40% of the players at the tournament, it wasn't a huge tournament, but there was quite an overrepresentation of Adeptus Custodes. And after round 1, every person, including myself, I think all of the Adeptus Custodes players were undefeated or had won their first game, and all of the Crusher Stampede players had won their first game. We lucked out somehow where we didn't get any mirror matches, so the Crusher Stampede players didn't play each other, and the Custodes players didn't play each other, which was pretty ludicrous. But we did have 2 Custodes on Crusher Stampede games, I believe. But as much as I'm not totally convinced that, I mean, Adeptus Custodes they're too powerful, full stop. Their win rate's too high, and they're too consistent. But I don't think like the faction's super duper busted or anything. But I would like to see it toned down, just so we don't see this, like, we don't get to the point where like 50% of an event is Adeptus Custodes. That's too much. It's boring. It sucks to play against, and that's kind of where we're at right now. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about the game in front of us. So I was up against Emperor's Chosen Adeptus Custodes. It was kind of a classic build. 2 units of Sagittarum, 1 unit of Prosecutors. We had Trajan and a Bike Shield Captain as well. 3 units of Virtus Praetors, 1 Caladius with Accelerator, or with Blaze Cannons, excuse me, with Blaze Cannons on it. So it was, I don't know, just sort of a normal Custodes list. It was basically what Custodes players typically play when they play games of Warhammer 40,000, so nothing particularly shocking there. Interestingly, it did only have 2 characters, which kind of threw me for a loop, because a lot of times the Custodes player would take 3 characters. You know the game is going to come down to, they'll take Praetorian Plate Guy, the Jetbike Shield Captain, and Trajan. And you know the game is going to come down to whether or not you can clear those infantry characters to score the objectives in the late game. And so I often take Assassination, because it's almost a guaranteed 7. I'll kill 2 of those guys, and then the last one is a question. And it's usually a 10. But in the list that only have 2 characters, things get really awkward, because you can only get 7 off of it. You'll probably get 7, because they have to come fight you. But it's a little bit unlikely. So I was like, So I didn't know what to take here. I ended up taking No Prisoners, which I didn't love. We took Psychic Interrogation, and we took Stranglehold, because it is a 5-objective mission, so all you have to do is run to the middle to get the Stranglehold. But I took No Prisoners this game, and I was a little bit worried about it. But each of those bike units is 15 wounds, so you get a 1.5 for killing a bike unit. The Sagittarium units are 9. I think I would have gotten... there's a Warden unit as well, so I think I would have gotten 8 or 9, and then the bonus point for getting at least 5 would have put me to 10, which I felt comfortable with. I believe is how that breakdown worked out. I do have my score sheet here. And especially because No Prisoners is such a powerful secondary, you don't have to change your game plan at all to do it. You just have to kill the models that are in front of you, because your opponent is playing basically nothing but big tanks or big infantry breaks and stuff. It was 8 on No Prisoners, and I at the bonus point put it to 9. So I wasn't super happy with my secondary pick there, but I didn't really feel like I had another good option for it. So that's what we did. Anyway, I did win the roll to go first on this one as well, and I did just talk about how going first is good in Scouring, and so that certainly helped a lot. My opponent played super duper defensively, hyper defensively, which I think is fair, given that, I have this artillery unit back here. This is Hive Guard, and they're going to shoot intercontinental ballistic laser snakes at my opponent the entire game. He put all of his bikes out of range of where Hive Guard could shoot them. He kept some more bikes in the back on the other side, and just played super scared from the guns, which is totally fair. So I ended up going first. This is turn 2, but I ended up going first and basically just assembling the brick in the center. I had the Scythe Tyrannid here, I had the Barbed Tyrannid out here, and I had most of them in the overlapping auras of the Maleceptor and the Venom Thropes. We did consider this area of the Ruin terrain here as line of sight blocking. So the Venom Thropes had a little bit of a place to hide before they had to move out, so they didn't get tagged by the Caladius or something, and they could provide the -1 to hit aura for stuff. Not that it really matters against Custodes, to be fair. They don't really care that much, but it did help a little bit. So we assembled the brick on the middle. We got Stranglehold. I was able to get Psychic Interrogation. I was able to get the Hive Tyrant in to clip an interrogation into one of the characters in the building and then run away. And that was my first turn. It was very inconsequential. I think I killed some models with the Hive Guard. I killed the Prosecutors with the Hive Guard, because I was worried about my opponent taking Prosecutors. He took Raise the Banner's High on his side of the table. I think he was also, besides Bring It Down, a little bit worried about secondaries. You could take Abhor the Witch against me, and that's usually fine. But he wasn't totally sure what the third objective was going to be there, and ended up with banners. But unfortunately, the ability for Crusher Stampede to obsec a monster and then go touch a banner and break it is pretty obnoxious for that secondary. So yeah, that's what ended up happening. He revealed Callistus turn 1 for his Kata. So additional movement speed, I believe. Or advance and shoot, as if you remain stationary, is what he used on the stance. And which, in my opinion, is almost always a mistake. I think if you're a Custodes player out here and you're wondering how to play against Crusher Stampede, almost every game should you reveal Rendax turn 1, in my opinion. Because especially because you can Castellan's mark your stuff around, you probably don't lose your guns to the Hive Guard if you go second. But the Tyranid player has to move up to take the center of the table because they're going to be taking Stranglehold and they're going to be trying to push their threat ranges into you. And you will get a turn of shooting them with auto-wounding 6s with Rendax with your entire army before any units die. And that gives you the best chance to degrade the Hierodules, and that's what you really want to be doing, because the further they're degraded, the worse they are at breaking through, the worse they are at holding objectives, and the slower they are, which means they have a tougher time getting to your bike. So if you stay at that 24-inch band as far away as you can, and you just put a bunch of automatic wounds into them, that's probably your best bet. So he revealed Callistus, and I was like, don't know if you need that. You also typically, especially going second, and obviously you can rearrange with Trajan too. So like, even if you want to switch to something else turn one, it's like, okay, you just do that. But even going second, because I have to set my dudes up in the front here, he can hide his bikes in the back. They move 14 to somewhere in the center here, and they're still in range of my entire army. You can't escape from Custodes' bikes going second. Or going first. They're gonna get you. They threat basically from the back edge of my opponent's table to like here without any help. So I don't think he needed Callistus in that situation. He also a little bit undercommitted. So he had you can see this is turn 2 and he had 1 unit of bikes sort of in reserve behind this building, and he put 1 in the center and he put 1 out on the side here to shoot at the Barbed Tyranid, which wasn't in the Venom Thrope aura, but he was in the Maleceptor aura. And I did diffuse turn 1 to reduce the damage of those bikes. Or reduce the strength. It doesn't actually reduce damage, I should say, but it will reduce the amount of damage I take on average. He put sort of peppered a couple wounds into here. I think we can see he did 4 to one of the Hierodules. The Scythe Hierodule took a rocket for 3 maybe, but because my shields were up, I had barriers and catalyst, and as well as the defensive stratagems up, I didn't take too much damage from that. So I was feeling pretty good at this point. My opponent had committed bikes, and I hadn't really lost anything yet. My opponent did still have 2 turns of Rendax into a turn of Dakatari still available, which is the benefit of not revealing Rendax turn 1, is that you have 2 turns of melee Rendax available. But I was about to push super hard into my opponent and make it really difficult for him to make the most use of that Rendax. So the Tyrannofex started doing his thing. So he basically set up, going first, he set up right in the middle here and just started spraying whatever he could. I specifically put him in a position with I think I double moved him turn 1 with a Metabolic Overdrive. And he got to a position where he could cover the entirety of my opponent's home objective and basically this entire area up until, the line of sight gets blocked by this ruin here. With the Flamer. So if my opponent committed anything, the Tyrannofex could shoot at it. And that's the real benefit of the Tyrannofex in these 5 objective missions, is that he can sit in the middle and he threatens the entire middle area of the table with that double shooting Flamer. And again, he's almost as hard to kill as a Hierodule. So your opponent really has to commit to kill him. And if they charge him, they have to worry about Overwatch, because it's a 2d6 hits rerolling damage. And he can shoot them in melee without penalty because he doesn't care about hit rolls. So assuming they don't kill him, which they probably don't, because, again, he's almost as hard to kill as a Hierodule. So he just chills in the middle there and hangs out and shoots flamers at people, and that's pretty solid. So I ended up, I gave myself a little bit of an awkward movement phase because I had to sort of sequence things awkwardly, but I ended up moving the Hierodule out here, getting a double move into my opponent's stuff on this left-hand side, and souping it up with all of the buffs and stuff like that. I elected to just put the Hive Tyrant on the line because my opponent was going to be have so few shooting or such little shooting that I wasn't super worried about the Hive Tyrant getting hit, and he kind of had to deal with the Hierodules right now. A bunch of shooting from the Barbed Tyranid and the Tyrannofex, as well as I think 1/2 unit from the Hive Guard went into the bikes in the middle and just wiped them. I had some psychic powers going to them too. I think I did 4 with a psychic power, and then the Hierodule clipped that wounded guy out, and the rest of them killed the other 2 bikes. So that felt pretty good. And then the other Hierodule double moved one in. He only killed 1 bike, and I think a couple of the Sagittarum that were on this objective. I charged both, split the attacks evenly between them, so my opponent had a tough time using his stratagems. He elected to use the stratagems to protect the bikes, which I think is the correct call. So I didn't do too much damage to them, but I did clear a lot of the Sagittarum on that side. And that felt pretty good. My opponent then, let's see what my next photo is. Yeah, so my opponent just started pushing super forward at this point. The other unit of bikes came in. He revealed Rendax turn 2. These guys turned into Solar Watch, so they ran over here to charge the Barb Tyro duel. Didn't go well for them, unfortunately. I think he didn't kill them in melee, but he did shoot them to death in the shooting phase. And then the character started pushing up into the middle, as we can see here. And basically, it just turned into this big toilet bowl in the middle between the infantry squad. So there was Wardens and Sagittarum and the characters pushing up towards the center objective. And as they moved up, all the guns would hit them, and then they would get charged by something. And it didn't go well for them. So we basically just tried to create a situation where everyone had to funnel into the center. So they funneled into the Tyrannofex shooting. They funneled into all of the psychic powers, and that was just good for me. And the Hive Guard and the Barb Tyro were continuing to do work. Now, the Tyrannofex didn't actually, besides that first turn, he didn't actually kill too much over the course of the game. Unfortunately, he rolled kind of poopy on his flamethrower. At one point, I think he rolled 5 attacks total on over the 2 shots. We rolled a 2 and a 3, which is unfortunate. And there's not really much you can do about that, unfortunately. But he did stick around. He just took a couple of damage from the charging characters and salvo launchers and stuff, and ended up, I believe, surviving the entire game. And basically we were able to, the Hyrule on this side was able to clear out this side eventually. The Hive Tyrant fought the characters and was able to kill them. The bike captain sunk into the middle and got killed by Swarmlord. And that ended up being a super big win. So that was a 94-39. Largely because this Hyrule was able to get obsacked early and start contesting this objective. He broke the turn that he charged in. He broke my opponent's control, the banner, and then broke control of that objective. The Sagittarum survived, so he was able to control it a turn later. But after that, the Hyrule had killed everything on that side of the table. So it was GG. I do think that my opponent could have played more aggressively, and that would have been better for him. Again, I think always reveal turn 1 Rendax. I'm never not going to put stuff in front for you to shoot with salvo launchers, but the Crusher Stampede game plan is to take the shots and not die. And with Rendax, you just have the best chance of doing that. And I think it was a big mistake to leave this bike unit sort of protected in reserve, because I can't kill 2 bike units in one turn. I can kill 1 with shooting. Or the equivalent of 1, and then maybe I can charge 1 and kill 1. But I'm going to do that anyway if you commit 2. So if you commit 3, you just get 2 turns of salvo launchering me with the 3rd unit. And even if I don't kill full units, that just means that your Emperor's Chosen rerolls are going to be more effective anyway, so it's whatever. So I think, I think he should have pushed that unit out. He should have pushed out a little bit more aggressively with the infantry and just tried to clear a Hyrule turn 1 and then go from there. But not doing that means that I got to basically just run around the table and blow stuff up. But he was a good opponent, and I think I don't think he played against Crusher Stampede before, so he was kind of learning the matchup. But it is a pretty interesting matchup. So, and as a Custodes player, I think it is one that you'll need to learn in order to succeed. And that brought us to the finals game, which was, this is on Tide of Conviction. Is that what it's called? That sounds right. Right? Tide of Conviction? Survey says, what a weird name. It is Tide of Conviction. What is Conviction a liquid? How does that work? I don't know. It's okay. It was Tide of Conviction. This is the one where it's a hold 2 to score 4, hold 3 to score 8. You have 1 objective in your deployment zone and 2 just out of your deployment zone. And then you get big benefits for... what is so you only get your start of turn CP if you hold the objective in your deployment zone. And then you get benefits for holding objectives in your opponent's side of the table. So you have to push forward and hold these objectives. Generally, I found that this despite the fact that it looks like a very widespread scenario, unlike the last one, unlike Scouring, where you have 5 objectives and you're just fighting for the middle for the most part, you put your support units on the sides and then it becomes a furball in the middle for the control of the center objective. This one feels like it would be different, right? Because there's 6 objectives, they're spread across the map, but I found that it's almost exactly this. It plays almost exactly the same. Instead, what you do is that your support units just stand on these objectives and maybe skirmish a little bit. And then the majority of the game is fought in this lane right here, right down the middle. So you just have a big old scrum, and you and your opponent are basically oftentimes trying to fight for these 2 objectives, because that gives you the 2 points for the special bonus mission, and threatens control of a 12-point turn for holding more. So I actually kind of like this mission. I haven't played it too many times. I've played it, I think, 3 or 4 times. But I think it's really interesting. It makes for like these sort of dynamic, aggressive games. But this is another one against, surprise, surprise, Adeptus Custodes. Whoa, what a shocker. And this is another one where my opponent and I both were kind of at a loss of what to take for secondary objectives. Let me grab the secondaries that we ended up taking. I think we both took Raise the Banners High, which is not a normal secondary in this matchup at all. We did both end up taking Stranglehold and Raise the Banners. I took Psychic Interrogation. My opponent took Bring It Down, which I think is fair. But what ends up being the case is that I think the first turn becomes much more important because we both took Stranglehold and because we both took Banners. So having first turn means that if you have Banners, or if you have Stranglehold, excuse me, you get to score Stranglehold for free on turn 1, basically. Because your opponent is not going to be on any objectives, so all you have to do is stand on your own 3 objectives and just say go. It also gives you the first opportunity to drop your Banners, which means that you have the potential to threaten a break on your opponent's banners top of 2, so they won't score those banners and then won't be able to reactivate them until they clear off your units on that objective. So those are points typically that they permanently lose. And potentially you can be contesting the banner drop on turn 1 if you're fast enough. So while I don't know how often this mission or matchup turns into a first turn game, just based on the secondaries we took, the first player was going to have a bit of an advantage. And I do say that because I also wanted to go first in this game too. So I was admittedly very lucky going first, because I went first in all 3 of my games, which was pretty impactful. But my opponent was playing a very interesting version of Custodes, and unfortunately you can't really see it right here in this picture because I did not take a picture of their army wholesale. Their army was gorgeous, by the way. They had the, what are these bikes called? Agamatus bikes? Is that what they're, something like that? They're the Forge World bikes. Technically, it's a different data sheet, but he was just using them as Virtus Praetors. He had 1 unit of those as Virtus Praetors, and then he had 1 as his shield captain with the blue base, which I mean, they looked great. And I think in my tournament last week, this player had actually won Best Painted, I believe, if I remember correctly. He also had 3 Achilles Dreadnoughts, which was interesting. Usually you see the Galatus Dreadnoughts, but the Achilles hit much harder. So theoretically, they're better into Crusher Stampede, except they're way easier to kill because the Galatus Dreadnought has a 4+ invulnerable save and is -1 to be hit in melee. The Achilles Dreadnought has no defensive technology whatsoever. It's a 2+ armor, 5+ invuln, 6+ ignore, just like a regular Relic Contemptor. And that's it. So I don't know how much I like the Achilles. It has better guns for sure. It has like a 3 damage laser on the spear, and it has Adrathic Destructors. I think you can take them on the wrists, or it can take Lastrum Stormbolter, so Strength 6 Stormbolter, which is good. Don't get me wrong. The shooting's great, especially with Emperor's Chosen. The melee is great, especially against stuff like Crusher Stampede, but the resilience is not quite there, which is unfortunate for my opponent. Other than that, I think he had 3 units of Sagittarum, or 2 units of Sagittarum, 1 unit of Prosecutors, and then regular Bike Captain plus Trajan. So again, only 2 characters on the for the Adeptus Custodes. I didn't get easy access to Assassination, which is why I took Raise the Banners High, which is I was definitely not planning on taking. But again, I got those little Venom Thropes on my list. I got the Neurothrope as well. Those can all drop banners, which makes me feel much better about banners in this version of Crusher Stampede versus a different version, where I have 6 potential banners units between 3 units of warriors, the Hive Guard, which remember can banners and shoot with Hive Man Imperative, the Venom Thropes, and the character. So I think it's fine. I think Banners is a good backup pick in these 6 objective missions with this style of Crusher Stampede, which is another reason I like it. We both took Stranglehold, like I mentioned before. We both took Banners. I took Interrogation. My opponent took Bring It Down, and then I won the roll to go first, which is pretty solid. So this game, basically, this is after my turn 1, basically became a huge furball. My opponent had a bunch of stuff deployed over here, and he castle and marked it back behind the terrain out of range of the Hive Guard, so I couldn't hit them. But, oh yeah, here are the Contempt Dracula. We can see them in this picture. Unfortunately for him, the Contemptors were having a little bit of trouble, and that's another reason that the Barbed Tower is actually kind of important, because he does threaten your opponent's positioning. A lot of times what you'll find is that if all of your guns are just Hive Guard, or even Harry Dan-less, if they're Hive Guard or Harry Dan, your opponent's going to be like, I do not care about defensive positioning, because outside of charging me turn 1 with stuff getting double moved, every single gun basically ignores line of sight. So you don't care, and a lot of them ignore cover. So you don't care about cover, you don't care about line of sight. You're just going to deploy on the line, make sure you don't get nailed by a Hyrule or something immediately from a double move, and then say go. The Barbed Hyrule, however, forces your opponent to think about their defensive play, because they do have to actually block line of sight so that guy doesn't shoot. So my opponent was then forced to put the Contemptors behind the walls, and unfortunately for them, they are not infantry. Despite being a 2-legged robot, they can't go through walls like a Sagittarium or a bike can. So they get stuck pretty hard, which is unfortunate, because they can't push up the table. They can't, actually threaten the midboard of the table. I basically just moved such that even if the Contemptor went around with Eternal Penitent and tried for a charge, he couldn't make a 12-inch rollable charge. So I had no reason to move any farther up the table, because I had range dominance essentially, and I out-threaded them because they couldn't move through those walls. Felt pretty good. Yeah, we took the aggressive position with the Tyrannofex, and he lived in the middle of the table for the rest of the game, as is his wont. So I don't think I double moved him. I just advanced him up as far as he could go and put him. Actually, I might have double moved him again, to be honest. I think he kept rolling 1s on advanced rolls, so I would spend a CP to double move him, which is fine. I think that's worth the CP. We assembled the brick in here. We had the Venom Thropes behind the line of sight blocking walls. There was a little bit of line if my opponent really wanted to push a bike squad like right up in the middle, like show Callistus or Salvus turn 1 or something, and like get one shot onto a Venom Thrope that I transhuman and try to block. He could maybe do that, but again, Custodes doesn't really care about -1 to hit, so they're not that worried about the Venom Thropes. But everybody was in all the auras. I put up all of the defensive buffs. I put barrier on the Tyrannofex, Catalyst on the Hyrule, so my opponent had awkward splitting of attacks, and then just basically said go, and symbolically diffused. My opponent played a little bit cagier than I think I would have liked. Like I said, I think you always drop Rendax turn 1 against Crusher Stampede, and he revealed Salvus for +4 range, which he didn't end up really needing, because I'm gonna take this position so he can shoot me out to like here, basically, which is where his guys were standing anyway. You don't really need the extra range. I think it let him like peek some shots out from the side, but and there was like a unit over here on the side I think he might have fired with, but it didn't really help him that much. I don't think he needs Salvus against Crusher Stampede. He ended up firing everything he could. The Dreadnoughts moved up sort of into the middle here. He ended up protecting them with a bike unit, I think, was placed along the center. He had one bike unit hiding behind, and then the 2 Contemptors, and fired everything into the Hyrule, pinged it for only a couple, and basically said go. So unfortunately, without that Rendax, not quite being able to get the damage through, and especially through the diffusion, basically giving his entire army -1 to wound. It was pretty brutal. So I didn't take too much damage from that. Feeling pretty good. He had to move up the table, so I did get the Flamer in range for the Tyrannofex, and the Tyrannofex went absolutely apeshit on my opponent's army. So we put the Focal Essence from the Maliceptor on it, so it can potentially get an additional point of AP and reroll its damage rolls. One interesting thing that does, and one thing I didn't consider with the pivot to taking Swarm Leader on the Hive Tyrant, is that my opponent has really awkward use of Emperor's Auspice during my shooting phase. In the previous version of Crusher Stampede that doesn't have those reroll effects, your opponent doesn't have to use Auspice at all, so they actually just save a bunch of CP. In this one, they have to consider using Auspice against the Hive Guard unit and against the Tyrannofex, because the Tyrannofex can reroll damage rolls, which Auspice also affects. So now you have this dude who doesn't care about transhuman because he wounds bikes on 4s anyway, who can be putting them on a 3+ or a 4+ save that they then maybe have to Auspice against damage, which means that as soon as they pop that Auspice, the Hive Guard can go ham on whatever they want with their full rerolls. So that's pretty cool. Not to mention the fact that you have, again, a bunch of activations between the Barbed Strangler, or the Barbed Hierodule, and the Hive Guard to force out a transhuman from them, or Arcane Genetic Alchemy, and it just makes their defensive strategy super awkward. So in this case, he had the screening unit of bikes that he had put in the middle. The Tyrannofex laid into them and absolutely started destroying them utterly. I did roll pretty well on him, to be fair, but I think he killed like 1.5 bikes in his first shot immediately. We started dropping Hive Guard shots into them as well, and then we put the Hierodule got souped up with every single buff. We did the Crusher Stampede thing where every token goes onto one Hierodule, and he just rockets into your opponent's army. He blew up the bike unit, and also I think killed some of the Wardens as well. And basically just forced my opponent to deal with him. So my opponent on the swing back, he revealed Rendax turn 2, which was good, and turned around. I should mention as well, it was important. There was a Contemptor Achilles behind the wall here. So the Hive Guard, I think, the Hierodule and the Tyrannofex did a bunch of damage to the bike unit in the center. The Hive Guard then retargeted and sprinkled attacks over a bunch of stuff to force defensive stratagem use. A bunch of stuff had been protected from the stratagems, so I double tapped and just fired into the Contemptor, and it died, which, to be fair, was a little bit unreasonable rolling. So I just straight up killed a Contemptor immediately, which was pretty unlikely. But my opponent was down a Contemptor turn 1, so it felt pretty good. So there were two Contemptors left. They went into the Hierodule, and they murdered it utterly. This was another game. So this is actually the other. This was the other Crusher versus Custodes game that was going on, and I think this is the game for second place. But this is Chris Vo from Vo Wargaming, I think is his YouTube channel. He has a 3D printed, or majority 3D printed Tyranid army, which is gorgeous. It's like this Meccano Tyranid army. So I had to take a picture because the other player, Gil here, is a local player who's a phenomenal hobbyist. He makes these incredibly elaborate display boards, makes these gorgeous armies, and everything's gorgeously painted. So I had to take a picture of this game because it was an absolutely gorgeous game. Plus, this orc terrain looks pretty good, I think. The whole table was just gorgeous. This is peak 40k right here. This is what you want to see at tournaments, is these incredible armies fighting each other that look amazing. Anyway, quick tangent. So my opponent revealed Rendax, sunk everything into the Tyrannofex, or the Hierodule, excuse me. Triggered a fight on death from the Hierodule, which killed one of the Contemptors, and I had been souped up with 3 extra attacks from Adrenaline Surge. So killed one of the Contemptors, and I took a couple of attacks on the other one. He rolled bad on vulnerable saves, took 2, and almost died. So he's left on only a couple wounds. But the Hierodule was dead. My opponent also had moved up and sort of engaged up into the middle here with bikes. I ended up pulling out of combat with the Psychers and just flamering that unit with the Tyrannofex, and again, it did 1 billion damage. And I think between Psychic Powers, the melee attacks, I think I might have killed one on the swing back when they charged in, and then the Tyrannofex shooting, and we cleared the second unit of Bikers as well. And then this was a turn after the Hive Tyrant, I believe, had gone in to clear out the remainder of the bikes. So the bikes had been mitigated utterly. The Tyrannofex at this point, I think, had racked up a kill count of 4 Virtus Praetors, which was pretty wild. And we were solidly in control of the game. Obviously, this Barb Tyranids was controlling my objective on the right-hand side, basically uncontested. He was just firing indiscriminately into whatever in the middle. The Tyrannofex was doing his thing, and then Psychic Powers and everything were going into that big furball in the center and doing a bunch of damage. We also had sent the Venom Tropes in, I think, to help clear the bikes out. They didn't do it and end up doing any damage, unfortunately, but I was proud of them. I was rooting for them. This is the last victory, unfortunately. But this ended up basically being an attrition victory. So my opponent was running out of stuff very quickly. He had a unit of Sagittarum in the back, up in the top here, that were holding down a Banner over there. He sunk the bike captain in, I think, to kill the Maleceptor. Trajan and the Hive Tyrant had an epic fight that the Hive Tyrant ended up winning. And then he had one unit of Sagittarum that ended up surviving over here to the late game. And he scored a couple of points on Banners, but ended up, I don't believe, getting a single score on Stranglehold, which was unfortunate. And again, that is a big benefit of going first in that mission, because you get the, he got cut on Stranglehold. Got a couple of points on Bring It Down, a couple of points on Banners, but unfortunately was mostly dead by the end of round 3. And so that ended up being an absolutely blowout score of 94-36. So, again, I think there's probably some matchup knowledge here. My opponent, I think, pushed too aggressively on their first turn, because I was able to get engagements into the bikes early without having to, like, double move Hyrule into them and stuff. He also, again, Salvis is unnecessary turn 1, especially long table edge deployment. Just reveal Rendax every time. Just always Rendax. Just Rendax is so strong. Just always do Rendax. Just Rendax into Nakatari, do maximum damage, and try to kill as much stuff as quickly as possible. But I think, even so, I think with the ability to put the Tyrannofex in such a dominant position in the center, where it could basically clear all the way through back to my opponent's objective early, he was able to basically flamer down whatever was committing into the middle, which certainly helped quite a bit. And that was the tournament. So I ended up with 3 big wins, a little bit of a low score in the first battle round against the Death Corps of Krieg, but 2 big wins against Adeptus Custodes. If I remember correctly, so the Shield Captain, actually, when he went in to go kill the Maleceptor, he had to charge the Tyrannofex as well, and the Tyrannofex ended up actually killing him as well. If I remember correctly, the kill count for the Tyrannofex by the end of the game was 5 bikes. It might have been 6, but I think it was 5. One of them being the Shield Captain and Dawn Eaglejet bike, which was pretty wild. If you consider those bikes are 85 points apiece, that guy basically paid for himself like 3 times over. What a phenomenal unit that freaking Tyrannofex is in this matchup. He's so good. He's so good. It helps when he goes first, so he can set up on turn 1, but I think going second, he's also fine. Even if he just moves once into the middle, and then just prepares to shoot, gets one shot off, or just takes the turn off advancing and then shoots next turn, I think it's fine. Yeah, super sold on that dude. What an absolute Chad. And that was it. So that put me at 3-0, and with my big scores, I won the tournament, which is very exciting. I think I have it on my back there, but if you see in the back, there's a kill. Yeah, there it is, right there. There's a Kill Team Charnath box, which is what I won for winning the tournament, which I was very excited about. And mostly going to use that for some terrain, for the terrain table for our live in-person games, but also I got some Tau Pathfinders, which go into my Tau army, which I'm pretty excited about. So anyway, that's what I have to say about the games this weekend. So super excited about the Tyrannofex doing well, and I'm playing him in TTS now as well. I played a game this morning that I did win against Tau. It was a little bit silly, but it was a pretty wild game. You can watch that VOD if you're a Twitch subscriber, but I'm very excited about this list. I think it's my favorite version of Crusher Stampede so far. It doesn't have the utility units like the Raveners or the Harpies. I am so off the Harpy train, it's unreal. I think that unit, I mean, it's good for 1 turn, but if your opponent has any kind of firepower whatsoever, they just immediately kill it. It doesn't do any damage, so you're throwing away 160 point units for free, and they're not hard to kill. Auto cannons kill them. So I think get rid of your Harpies, put in Chad Maleceptor, or Chad Tyrannofex plus Maleceptor. There's less easy access to secondaries without the Harpy, and you do have to actually commit like big monsters to do that, but that's what you're doing anyway, playing Crusher Stampede. And you basically get another combat unit, because that Tyrannofex, while he can't charge and play aggressively, he hits so hard in shooting, even if you're engaged with him, that he helps clear infantry, he helps fight these like sort of medium armor Custodes stuff, and he's just great. The one downside is if you're a 2+ save in cover, he has trouble with that. So Custodes infantry specifically, he's not so great against. So if we start moving from Custodes bikes to seeing more like the Solar Watch list with a bunch of shields, his stock will go down, admittedly. He's also not super amazing against Tau, because if you have like Iridium armor battlesuits in cover, they can tank him. But one thing he does do is he forces you to take saves on your battlesuits rather than your drones, because if you're playing like a Farsight Enclave's Crisis Suit build, and you have a bunch of shield drones in your units, he sprays a unit and forces you to start taking saves on drones, because if you take them on the battlesuits, he can force you to take saves, you pass them, he retargets to another unit, does it again, then the Hyrule goes and just starts shooting into the battlesuits that you can't take on drones. So you end up losing battlesuits from him. It's like not perfect, it's not a great matchup for him. You can also kind of stay out of his range as a Tau player, but I think he's still fine. He's still definitely got uses. He just makes your target selection super awkward. So anyway, I'm very excited. Looks like there's some questions in chat. What is the Tyrannofex kitted with? Acid spray every time. The focal essence from the Maleceptor is basically also a Tyrannofex upgrade. I kind of equate those together. So it's a 160 point model, but there's a 15 point ability stapled to him that you wouldn't really take otherwise. It's okay on the Venom Thropes and on the Hive Guard, especially because I have Swarm Leader in the list, so I can like fully kit out the Hive Guard with the full rerolls plus reroll damage. But I wouldn't usually take it otherwise. I would save the 15 points. Mr. Dodo had a 60-man tournament this weekend. Also brought it home for Tyranids. Mr. Dodo, congratulations, dude. 60 people, that's huge. Was that a GT or just like a big RTT? Rezio, yeah, I talked about the Barbed Pyro a little bit. Scythe is more efficient, but I think I'm sold on the Barbed Pyro. Specifically because so much of the game is like about trading shots right now. The Barbed Tyranid gives you another gun that your opponent has to deal with, and he's two-side Tyranid is like a lot of the same thing, right? And the Barbed Tyranid gives you some flexibility. I think I like him. He's been very good in my game so far. It's been nice to have an additional gun in the list. Especially because he often just gets to shoot all game, rather than the side Tyranid which get 1 to 2 rounds of attacking and then they're done. So the Barbed Tyranid is just a little bit more consistent. Plus your opponent usually has to kill the side Tyranid first, because it's like right up in their face. So he just does whatever and hangs around for a bit. What are the wings on the Hive Tyrant? So this is an old school Hive Tyrant. This is a metal Hive Tyrant, which back in the day, do I have a better picture of it? He might be in my case, actually. I might just be able to, what if I just throw my face cam in front here, chat? Here we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? So it's show and tell story time. Here's my case. My Hive Tyrant should be in here. I'm gonna stand up. Yeah, here he is. Ooh, he's caught on a Demacaron. No, Demacaron, no. It's not your time. So here he is. Yeah, so this is an old school metal Hive Tyrant. And back in the day, Hive Tyrant kits did not have wings in them. So that's awkward. But you could buy a wing set separately from Games Workshop. I think it was... There were two options. You either used Fantasy Dragon Wings, or you used Balrog from Lord of the Rings. And I think this is the Fantasy Dragon version. And you would get those and you would like graft them onto your Hive Tyrant to actually make him winged. But you could still take wings. They just didn't make a wing set for the Hive Tyrant. So this is a venerable old Hive Tyrant here, chat. I am afraid to say that I'm not the original manufacturer of this guy. He's an eBay rescue. But I think he came out pretty nice. He looks good. And I still have the big winged Hive Tyrant as well. Over here. He's hanging out in the back there. All right. Face cam time over. Let's make this smaller again. Woo. That was show and tell time. Hope everyone enjoyed. Mr. Dodo played a big RTT. It's a local tournament because of the ending of COVID restrictions. Got a lot of people joining. Yeah, that definitely has been the case so far. We've been having a couple good, a couple big tournaments in my area as well, just because people are super excited to get out. And I know my local stores are running a lot of new player leagues and stuff like that. And a lot of people, especially, which is super cool to see, who have been getting into 40K as a hobby to do. During quarantine, are then getting now out on the table and actually playing with people. So a lot of people have been buying kits just for something to do, to assemble and paint them, and now we're getting onto the table to play. And so they come out, like these people just show up, they're like, I've never played 40K before, but here's my 2,000 point army that I built over quarantine. And that's really cool to see. It's awesome to see all these new players coming into the game. It's super awesome. It's super sick. Rezial, I'm running both Hyrule types. I suppose Exocrines aren't that good. Yeah, I don't rate Exocrines. I also think we've had the Exocrine discussion a lot recently, or every show. I think every Tactical Tuesday we talk about Exocrines. The 2 damage is sad on Exocrines. It's obviously like it's the same issue on Barbed Power Duels, right? -1 damage effects, which to be fair is less, but it is still Crusher Stampede. And against Crusher Stampede, at least the Barbed Power Duel is Strength 8. So he's not quite as hosed by T8 enemies as the Exocrine is. But -1 damage effects just tank an Exocrine super hardcore. I also, in my opinion, the release of the Tau Codex has kind of made the Exocrine, the symbiotic devastation discussion a little bit more awkward because of the way that remain stationary versus not moved works. If in an event that you rule that you can symbiotic devastation and double shoot an Exocrine, that opens up an argument for a Tau player to be able to advance and perform actions with their army. And I don't think that's great if they declare Monka. So in the Tactical Tortoise events over on the Discord, we've actually reversed the ruling. We previously counted remaining stationary and not moving as synonymous, which is potentially the intention of the rule, but because of the new remain stationary FAQ, well, it's not that new. Because of the existence of the remain stationary FAQ, there is this actual mechanical difference between remaining stationary and not moving. And Tau can exploit that. So because of the release of the Tau Codex, we've actually reversed the rule that those are the ruling or the interpretation that those are synonymous, which means that at least in Tactical Tortoise events, Exocrines cannot strat to double shap their gun. They basically are allowed to fall back and shoot with the strat is essentially the rule, which is not that great. So I think there's less of an argument now that you are able to double tap your Exocrine and fire it. Which means that Exocrines are very slow and very ponderous to use. And unlike a Tyrannofex, an Exocrine isn't benefited from taking the center of the table. They're easier to kill than a Tyrannofex. They do significantly less damage than Tyrannofex. They're worse in melee than a Tyrannofex. And so they're not like this. They're not really equivalent. The Exocrine has to be moving and trying to get line of sight. And if it can't do that and double tap its gun, it's pointless. So I don't think Exocrines are good. That said, if the leaks that we talked about in that video are true, and the Exocrine profile is, what it says in the new instruction guide, pick up an Exocrine now, chat, because I think they're going to be out of stock pretty quickly. Heretic Miniatures, thoughts on Harpies in Crusher Stampede? So I did talk about it a little bit before. I think Harpies are fine, but I don't think they're good. And the reason for that is they are very expensive for a unit that is highly inconsistent at actually dealing damage to your opponent's army. Which, to be fair, I mean, the counter argument is obviously that the goal is to score points with a Harpy. The goal is not to kill your opponent's models. But Crusher Stampede is such a model count strapped army archetype that you can't have this, you know, what is equivalent to probably, you know, what is it, 8% of your list that doesn't do any damage. So, you know, that's on top of the other support units that you're already taking. So in this case, like, we have Venom Thropes, we have Warriors, all that stuff is probably not doing any damage to your opponent's army. Were you to layer Harpies on top of that, you now have a significant portion of your army that is not combat effective, essentially, and is only there to score points. And Harpies, in my opinion, are too expensive for that. You look at 100, 120 points for a Harpy, I would consider it. But once you're at the point of competing with things like Tyrannofexes and Hive Tyrants, Harpies are not going to do enough. I think they're very useful, and I certainly don't think that they're like garbage, right? And a lot of times your average score is going to increase because you have a Harpy in your list and you have a broader spectrum of secondaries you can take. But I think matchups like Adeptus, Custodes, and Tau, who don't care about you scoring secondaries on them and only care about winning the fight in the middle, they are going to prey on those lists that have Harpies hardcore. And it's your list in the matchups that the score is going to be super close on are going to be way harder because you have a Harpy in your list. That's my opinion. I don't think Harpies are great in Crusher Stampede, at least anymore, because you know, Tau and Custodes are so hard to beat that you can't have sort of chaff in your army. That units that don't fulfill a very specific role, in my opinion, are not there. Reziel, can we do anything without Forge World units, though? Seems like they're necessary. I think that's... I mean, yeah, to play optimal Crusher Stampede, I think you do need the resin stuff, for sure. I think Hyrule Duels are... Like, if you want to play a Crusher Stampede that wins tournaments, I think Hyrule Duels are sort of required. You can do fine without them. Like, if you want to play... I think Tyrannofexes are like an interesting unit to look at. Hive Tyrants are fine. The problem is that you don't have that like big T8 front line besides Tyrannofexes, obviously, that, you know, just makes use of every single Crusher Stampede benefit like Hyrule Duels do. Hyrule Duels are sort of the perfect unit for Crusher Stampede, and unfortunately, there's just not an equivalent in plastic. Like Haraspexes maybe, but they're so expensive and slow. It's kind of stupid. It's a badly designed unit. Even the updated version doesn't look that good from the 9th edition. Spoilers. So, yeah, I do think that you need the Forge World resin, unfortunately, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on today is some of the results from this weekend. Let me grab my. I guess we can look at DGI. And talk about, I think, some of the trends that we might be seeing. So here's the Discount Game Sync site. Oh, we're zoomed in super far. Let's zoom that out. So this is just an amalgamation of top 5 and top 8 tournament lists, and we see obviously there's a lot of Tau Empire that have been winning this past weekend, but they're kind of they're being countered a little bit by Adeptus Custodes, and one of the things that I was really thinking about over the weekend was why Tau in some cases look super dominant and in some cases are just getting murdered. Like in some situations it feels like Tau is unstoppable. And I think if you watch the coverage of the Cherokee Open, that was on War Games Live. Shout out to War Games Live, by the way. Phenomenal event coverage. And they also streamed on the Frontline Gaming Twitch channel this weekend. But I think that was just because it was a Frontline Gaming event. But the Cherokee Open was played this weekend, and they used the FLG player optimized terrain rules. And as a result, I believe we saw this predominance of Tau Empire. That said, in a lot of these other events, we're seeing Tau get relegated to an X and 1 spot, essentially. So, like, we can see this is last weekend. Salt Classic and Battle Brothers both had Adeptus Custodes first and second. Tau got pushed down to third or fourth. Whereas this weekend we saw Tau in top 3 spots of Frontline Gaming. And I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of these armies a lot of these events that are being dominated by Tau Empire use that player optimized terrain. And I think that's because not only do you get the ability to give yourself good line of sight blockers so the Tau player doesn't have to worry about counter alpha strikes as much, but you can also play sort of the aggressive terrain placement game where you can try to zone out enemy line of sight blockers in good positions with that with your own line of sight blockers. I wonder, I haven't looked up Valhalla GT. I wonder if they use player place terrain. Let's find out. Because they had Tau first and second. Valhalla GT. No, there's a lot of video games about that. Let's see if we can find an event packet for it. Looks like it was Michigan, is that right? Yes. Yes. Let's see if we can find an event packet. Sorry, I'm on their Facebook page right now. I apologize, chat. Okay. Nope, this is not what I wanted. Go back. I can't find an event packet. Poop. Okay. Adeptus Ridiculous, thanks for hanging out, dude. Appreciate it. Shout out to the genius who took a Hierophant Bio-Titan to his first 7th of the G2 last weekend. Yeah, I think there's a couple people playing Hierophants. I do have to wonder. I think the T5S2 team tournament is going on right now, which is, I think it's 13 teams, it's 60 players. It's kind of big. We're pretty excited about it. I think it has 1 Hierophant Bio-Titan in it, which is like, hats off to that guy. You gotta be pretty spicy to take a Hierophant. Just hope you don't get. I guess to be fair, the team tournament format, at least the one that we're using, you pair each mission specifically. So you have 5 versus 5. Every table gets a mission on it, which means that you can try to pair the Hierophant on tables that don't use long table edge deployment. So you can actually probably use a Hierophant pretty effectively in a team tournament format. I actually hadn't thought about that before, but that's really cool. So, in my opinion, the player optimized terrain rules are one of the reasons that Tau Empire is doing so well. Because it seems to me that the events that don't use it, and especially the events that use US Open terrain, Tau Empire does not do nearly as well. Because there's significantly more line of sight blocking. You know, even if we look at the tables that I was playing on, the event organizers did rule that the windows that we can see here basically were actually not, they were going to be played as closed. So kind of like ITC rules where you play the walls as opaque. But I have obscuring protection in the back, right? So I have this area as obscuring protection, and then I also have this area that has true line of sight blocking, which means I have a ton of table space that I can hide my stuff behind, especially my support units behind. And as much as I don't know if Crusher Stampede benefits from that quite as much, so a faction like Custodes that can sit in cover against the burst cannons that don't have target locks, or that can line of sight block against their railguns, especially like the broadside railguns and stuff like that, they can then use these terrain pieces to leapfrog essentially behind line of sight blocking pieces of terrain, and it gets very hard to deliver the direct fire guns onto these Custodes units. Now, that's obviously doesn't automatically win you the game. It just gives you a bit of a leg up. You still have to be able to use your defensive stratagems wisely. You still have to be able to survive the indirect fire, but I think it gives you a huge benefit in that matchup. And watching the players who are very good at player optimized terrain who are playing Tau, it looks very difficult to set up effectively to not get alpha struck by a Farsight Enclave style list. And that's my opinion about that, chat. I'd be curious to think what other people think, because it's been the Tau experience has been so inconsistent that I'm just curious. It's just a curious thing. Adeptus Custodes, I think on the whole are doing better than Tau, but we do have we have these several events where Tau just spike up super hardcore. It's not like I think Adeptus Custodes are in these top 8s a little bit more frequently than Tau are, but when Tau I guess it's winning placement, right, is going to be a very favorable metric for Tau. So if they're able to get to that 4-0 position, it looks like the chances that they win the tournament are very high. Which leads me to believe that there's sort of a, maybe a metagame factor that's pushing up the Tau Empire's win rate. Resiel, Scythe Tyranids are in stock, barbed out of stock. How many scythes do you buy? I would put 2 Scythe Tyranids in your cart there, Resiel. I think double Scythe Tyranids are great. You can also magnetize the arms, and you just make yourself the barbed Tyranid, which is basically what I've done. So I bought basically when Crusher Stampede came out, I bought 3 barbed Tyranids. Too many barbed Tyranids, chat, is what I bought. And if we look, my side Tyranid is a barbed Tyranid that has taken all of the arms from the other barbed Tyranids. I gave him some extra mandibles. I gave him some adrenal glands because he's faster than the other one. I've changed his base up a little bit, so I did some extra stuff to him to make sure he's. He's behind me right now. My Harados are all on my table. So he is he's just a barbed Tyranid with the side Tyranid bits essentially. But I think it looks the part, and you can basically do the same thing the other way. As you just give him big guns and you ignore the big gun on his back. They magnetize pretty well, I think. You do have to cut down the ball and socket joints on the arms, but you can probably do that just fine. And to be honest, most people have never seen a Hyrule before in their life, and they don't know the difference. So that's the real benefit of Tyranids, is you can do whatever you want modeling because people have no idea what your weapons look like. So I think it's fine. Building 88, question. So I think the new Tyranid Codex will be a net buff or a net nerf. I think that it depends a lot on what... Oh no, I'm sorry, chat. My I hit the mute on my good old headset. All right, so I don't know how much got cut out there, but the core of what I was saying was that the power of the new Tyranid Codex depends entirely on what supplements Tyranids retain access to. So I think the core of the Tyranid Codex is going to lose a lot of its movement shenanigans and its funky stuff. It's going to generally get better because the profiles are going to get better and they'll get, updated stratagems and stuff like that. You'll probably lose things like Hive Commander and Metabolic Overdrive and Overrun. All that stuff will probably be going away. Double Shoot will probably be going away or toned down and all that stuff. But the units themselves will be better. The weird part about Tyranids is that a lot of the power of the faction is rolled up in supplements that are separate from the Codex. And you're basically... so essentially... how powerful the faction is depends on whether or not those supplements are still legal. If Crusher Stampede is still legal, you lose some threat range and some, the backline artillery and stuff like that, but all of your profiles get significantly more resilient. Crusher Stampede is still going to be great. If you lose Crusher Stampede and you lose your double moves, probably a net loss. So I think the Codex itself is going to be much better than the 8th edition version, but the faction itself may see a decrease, but it depends entirely on what rules are legal. We'll see. yeah, chat. The 40K SWAT team came over and cut my mic off because I was giving everyone the secrets to win every game of 40K. I'm sorry, chat. I was giving you all of the stats in the new Tyranid Codex, and they cut off my audio. MLP 92, looking forward to tournaments again. We'll take some time. Just ordered your first Harlequins. Well, they're getting some phenomenal new rules that I have on good authority are going to be a big deal. So enjoy those Harlequins. They're going to be good. Reziel, worried to see what happens to Hiveguard? Yeah, I wouldn't hold your hopes up for Hiveguard. I think Hiveguard will probably not be good. Building, AdMech kept their Army of Renown from before their decks came out. If I remember correctly, the Adeptus Mechanicus Army of Renown came out simultaneously with the Codex. It wasn't before. Yeah, I think it was at the same time. And the same with the Drukhari and Orc Armies of Renown. Those all came out alongside the Codex. And, I mean, it might be the case that the Tyranid Codex was one of the ones that got the distribution of got messed up and was supposed to come out alongside Crusher Stampede, which means that Crusher Stampede may be legal, may remain legal. I think if I were to put money on it, I would bet that Crusher Stampede remains legal and the Leviathan supplement gets rolled into the new Codex. But I have no idea. I have literally no idea. So I can't really speculate too much. It's entirely speculation. Anyway, chat. I think that's all I have to say about that. Armies of Renown are a 9th edition thing. There were no Armies of Renown in 8th edition. That's correct. What we had in 8th edition were called Specialist Detachments, which were... they were less restrictive than Army of Renown. You would just pick one detachment in your army, and for a CP cost, you would upgrade it to a Specialist Detachment, and it basically gave you Army of Renown benefits. So, like, your guys would get a special ability, you would get some stratagems, you would get, like, maybe some warlord traits or something, and it cost you a CP. And it was a bit unfortunate in 8th edition because... and I think it's going to be kind of the same in 9th edition, where the power of your army would change significantly depending on whether or not you had a good Specialist Detachment. I don't believe Tyranids ever had one, if I remember correctly. Genestealer Cult had a great one. Astra Militarum had several good ones. And most of the other ones I forget about, so I don't know. Astra Militarums, I think, were the standout. They kept that faction relevant through a lot of 8th edition, even when they were getting kicked down to the curb by Space Marines. They had a flat 3 damage battle cannon before it was cool. Before all these flat 3 damage weapons came out in 9th edition, Astra Militarum were doing it first. But that was a mechanic that was 8th edition exclusive and was removed essentially for match play in 9th edition. The rules still exist and are legal, but not in GT, I believe. GT specifically disallows them. We just gotta wait for Eldar to start dunking on Tau. We'll see. That does seem like an interesting matchup based on what I've heard. Apparently, Eldar has a lot of sort of anti-Tau mechanics, but their base profiles are so I guess fragile that sometimes Tau just kills them, and it's kind of dicey. So like they have a lot of stuff that turn, like, you know, Harlequins, I believe, if I remember correctly, innately turn off rerolls and have hit modifiers, and Tau don't like any of those. The way they get around hit modifiers is by rerolling their hit rolls, and they can't do that against Harlequins. So Harlequins just turn the game into this huge dice fest where you just hope that you can hit them with your smart missile systems, and if you can't, it goes very poorly. What do I think about sacrificial Molochs for Crusher Stampede? I feel like 2 or 3 would provide near absolute freedom for the rest of the army turn 1. So I think similar to the Harpy, I think they're too expensive to just throw away as like an idiot, you know, just a unit that runs into the front of your opponent's face. You know, you're talking about running 3 Molochs is almost 400 points, and you can get you get like 2 big combat monsters for that, basically. Either 2 Hive Tyrants or a Hierodule and a Tyrannofex, or, you know, so some combination of those. So as I've been playing Crusher Stampede, I've been shaving the shaft more and more, and the list has felt more and more powerful the more actual combat units I put into it. So I think I like Molochs more than I like Harpies, just because they can take objectives from people who don't have objectives secured. That said, objective secured is so common now that's kind of awkward, and there's counterplay to them coming and taking your objective, whereas the Harpy is more easily applicable. But their investment is a lot lower. So as a one-off for a Moloch, in order to score engage in all fronts or score stranglehold, you just steal an objective from somebody, like, you know, just pop him up on an objective that's in no man's land or whatever. I think Molochs are fine, but I don't really like taking those utility units anymore. I think, in my opinion, Tau and Custodes are too efficient, and in order to fight them, you have to be as efficient as possible. And taking those, like, just objective scoring units are not that great. A lot of that has been also informed by the fact that in GT 2022, Crusher Stampede actually has 2 secondaries that they're very good at, which is Stranglehold and Psychic Interrogation, which those units, while they're sometimes good, so units like Harpies and Molochs, while they're sometimes good, especially at getting Stranglehold, they don't interact very favorably with those objectives at all. In the previous version of GT, in 2021, you were taking Engage and you were taking Deploy Scramblers. And for Engage in all fronts, Harpies and Molochs are much more powerful. But because you don't need those secondaries anymore, I think that's one of the reasons that those utility units are less good. A Harpy running onto an objective to get Stranglehold is significantly less powerful than a Hierodule doing that, because the Hierodule then forces your opponent to deal with it, whereas a Harpy, they'll just kill with random attacks. Whereas if the Harpy is strafing around the side of the table, getting engaged on all fronts and staying KG and out of line of sight and stuff like that, it's a lot harder to deal with. Your opponent has to try harder to kill it. So that's my opinion. Reziel 1 Hierodule ordered? Yeah, 1 Hierodule's fine. You'll be fine with 1 Hierodule. They're so good. They're so good, chat. You'll appreciate the Hierodules. All right, chat. Well, I think that has been a Tactical Tuesday for today. It's been a good one. Pretty chuffed I was able to win that tournament. I did win all my rolls to go first, which is a pretty big deal. I don't have an event up for it now, but I will put one up right after this stream. I'm going to be live streaming in the studio on Thursday. I plan to live stream games Thursdays from here on out. So we're going to see how often I can organize those games But Thursday at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time is going to be the time for live streamed games on the YouTube channel. We got one, and my opponent for this week is actually going to be my round 3 opponent from this tournament. So we're going to rematch. I think I'm going to play Harry Dan. I don't know if he's playing Custodes. I believe it is going to be Custodes, but I'm excited to throw some Harry Dan down on the table. Hopefully he doesn't fall over. That'll be exciting. But Thursday at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern, be here. We're going to play some freaking 40K. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to try to get more people in. We're going to try to get some games where I can just sort of be a producer and maybe a commentator. But we'll see how it goes. I'm pretty chuffed. It's going to be awesome. Looks like there was a question. Building, no. Errant Pursuits. Do I use the adaptation for psychic action plus psychic power to maximize interrogate? No, I don't. In my opinion, I think Biomorphic Carapace is really good. There are some matchups where Biomorphic Carapace just immediately wins you the game. And even against Tau and Custodes have workarounds because they can reroll their wound rolls, and Tau have the same. It's good. It's not the best thing ever. But losing the psychic power to your mental interrogation every turn doesn't feel like that big of a trade-off to get access to Biomorphic Carapace. In my opinion, Crusher Stampede does not function without Adaptive Neural Lobe. I think you have to have that every time you play the list. And I played a couple versions. I played them on stream. I played one last week, I think, that did not have Adaptive Neural Lobe. Oh, no, I did play Adaptive Neural Lobe last week. But I played a couple versions on stream over the course of the last couple weeks that didn't have Neural Lobe and took Synaptic High Blades instead. And it was not good. It was bad. I think the CP regen is too valuable for Crusher Stampede. It lives or dies on its CP expenditure. And if you can't regen that like 2 to 3 additional CP every game, it falls apart. So, you have to ask yourself whether like an extra psychic power once or twice a game is worth 2 to 3 activations of breaking through, and 99% of the time it's not. So that's where my head's at. I think my relic selections are locked in. Things could change, obviously, if factions come out that ignore Biomorphic Carapace or can play around the Hive Tyrant. But I think the Smashy Hive Tyrant with Carapace is too strong. That's what I have to say. Herod and Crusher Stampede live on stream. Crusher Stampede list live on stream. Yes, that's the plan for Thursday. I have to build a Crusher Stampede list now with Harry Dan. I have an okay one, but it has a Heartbeat, which I don't have. Maybe I just take a Tyrannofex instead. Who knows? I don't know. It'll be fun. I'm excited. So tune in Thursday. We're going to play some games. I have games scheduled on the Twitch channel every other day. So right now, the current streaming schedule, we'll see how long this can keep up. But I'm going to be streaming Monday, Wednesday, Thursday on Twitch around 4 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I'm going to be streaming Tuesday, Thursday here on YouTube, Tactical Tuesday. Play a game on Thursday, whatever that's going to be called. Throwdown Thursday? How about that? That sounds good, right, chat? I'm into it. So come hang out with me. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Tactical Tuesday. Really appreciate it. And I'll see y'all every day on stream. So yeah, come hang out with me. Cheers, everybody.